They said it wasn't real, they said it was just talk. But as 2025 unfolds, quiet movements behind closed financial doors are beginning to tell a very different story. For years, the idea of a revaluation or global adjustment involving the Iraqi dinar and Vietnamese dong was dismissed as speculation, something that belonged to forums and rumor mills, not boardrooms. Yet now something remarkable is happening. New whispers from financial institutions, discrete policy changes, and subtle digital updates across international banking networks have started to form a pattern too consistent to ignore. Whether this signals a controlled currency evolution or simply a regional modernization, one thing is certain: something is shifting, and those who have been watching closely are seeing signs they've waited years to witness. Stay with us, because by the end of this report, you'll understand why the IQD and VND conversation has suddenly turned from fantasy to possibility. Let's begin with what's quietly happening in the background. Throughout 2025, several international financial hubs, from Dubai to Singapore and even select U.S. metro branches, have begun updating their currency systems to reflect expanded access to lesser traded denominations. The Iraqi Dinar IQD and the Vietnamese Dong of VND are two of the most notable among them. Though neither is officially recognized as major traded currencies, banks are now testing infrastructure capable of processing these notes more efficiently. These are not public announcements, they're back-end updates, digital readiness tests, verification software improvements, and updated compliance codes for exotic currencies. While this doesn't confirm a full revaluation, it signals preparation. And in the world of finance, preparation usually precedes opportunity. Why is this important? Because for years, the conversation around IQ and VND was dominated by extremes, either unproven hype or complete dismissal. But reality has now entered the middle ground. The truth lies in what's quietly being built: legitimacy through readiness. Banks rarely invest time or resources in currencies they don't plan to handle. Financial institutions like Chase Citibank and Wells Fargo, for example, have maintained dormant or limited foreign currency desks for years. But in early 2025, several urban branches began reactivating systems and training staff for more diverse currency handling. This doesn't mean they are actively exchanging dinar or dong at new rates today, but it does suggest they are positioning themselves for something that may soon demand that ability. Behind the scenes, fintech companies are also playing their part. A number of emerging platforms have begun pilot programs that include exotic currencies for testing. These are small, tightly regulated trials that measure how digital transfers or mail-in currency exchanges can be verified, processed, and cleared securely. The Iraqi dinar and Vietnamese dong are now part of some of these controlled environments, often without public marketing. For years, large digital exchange platforms such as Wise or Payoneer avoided these currencies due to risk factors, but new startups see opportunity where others see complexity. Their approach is simple: establish secure, verifiable systems that can eventually integrate less common currencies into mainstream use. And while all this is happening quietly, ordinary holders of IQ and VND are beginning to notice subtle clues. Calls to bank currency desks that once ended in polite refusals are now met with measured responses like, "We're updating our foreign currency policy," or "certain branches are under review for expanded services." Those statements, vague as they sound, represent progress. In financial language, that's not speculation, that's coded preparation. History shows that policy changes of this kind often begin locally before expanding regionally and eventually nationally. If the process continues through 2025, it may mark the first coordinated step toward legitimate access to these exotic currencies in more mainstream financial channels. To understand why this matters, we have to look at how far both Iraq and Vietnam have come economically. Iraq's oil production has stabilized after years of fluctuation, with infrastructure rebuilding at its strongest point in more than a decade. The Central Bank of Iraq has modernized its payment systems and strengthened international cooperation to improve transparency and fiscal management. Meanwhile, Vietnam continues to rise as a major manufacturing and export hub, attracting foreign investment from tech giants and energy firms alike. When economies mature and gain stability, their currencies naturally become more attractive to global traders. And that's where this story begins to align with quiet financial movement abroad. It's not just about optimism, it's about math. Currency values are ultimately a reflection of a nation's productive strength and global demand. The IQD and VND have long been undervalued in the speculative view, but as their country's economic indicators improve, the financial world must adjust. Institutions don't publicly announce such shifts ahead of time, but they prepare through infrastructure, through the systems we're now seeing quietly evolve. It's the silent phase before visibility, and in 2025, that silent phase appears to be ending. However, it's vital to separate excitement from expectation. A new era of accessibility doesn't mean an overnight revaluation. What's likely happening is a gradual normalization of these currencies into the global financial grid. That means greater ease of exchange for legitimate holders, clearer verification paths, and more consistent data tracking across systems. It's a slow, methodical process, one designed to prevent chaos while establishing trust. But for those who have followed the story for years, even that represents enormous progress. At the human level, holders are preparing differently too. Unlike the early 2010s, when rumors dominated online forums, 25's investors are far more educated. They understand anti-money laundering laws, identification requirements, and transaction reporting. Many are already documenting purchase receipts, verifying their notes' authenticity, and researching which financial centers might handle them when policies expand. This professionalism is critical because banks respond better to prepared, compliant clients. The days of showing up with currency and expecting special treatment are gone. The modern approach is informed, verified, and ready for regulatory inspection. Interestingly, we've also seen growth in legitimate private exchange offices, especially near major U.S. airports and embassy zones. These offices aren't promising unrealistic rates or secret programs. They're simply improving infrastructure for exotic currency processing. Some have partnered with larger liquidity providers to ensure transparent pricing and secure transactions. That evolution shows one key thing: the market is quietly maturing. The IQ and VND are transitioning from rumor to regulated handling, from online speculation to physical accessibility. As fintech evolves, digital verification tools are now capable of authenticating physical banknotes in seconds. This technology drastically reduces fraud risk, which has historically kept large institutions away from exotic currencies. When the risk barrier drops, institutional willingness rises. That's why 2025 may be remembered as the year when exotic currency handling shifted from impossible to inevitable. Whether through banks, fintech, or licensed exchanges, the infrastructure for legitimacy is now being laid, and it's stronger than ever before. Of course, where there is progress, there's also deception, scams promising special redemption groups or private insider rates have resurfaced online, preying on renewed optimism. It's vital for holders to remain cautious. Legitimate change in the currency world never arrives through secret lists or unofficial offers. It comes through policy updates, verifiable licensing, and regulated systems. If you ever encounter someone claiming privileged access to a hidden exchange, remember, no real financial institution works in the shadows. Transparency is always the mark of truth. The reason this moment feels different is that the conversation has matured. Governments, banks, and investors are no longer dismissing IQD and VND entirely. They're analyzing them realistically. This grounded approach, fueled by credible financial progress in both countries, is slowly bridging the gap between possibility and practicality. It's not about chasing sudden riches anymore. It's about understanding global economics, timing, and verified access points. For long-term holders, this shift from hype to fact is the most powerful sign of all. Timing remains everything. Markets move on information, not emotion. The best investors are patient observers, not impulsive speculators. As Iraq's energy exports strengthen and Vietnam's trade network expands, both nations are moving closer to higher global confidence ratings. And when that confidence grows, currency accessibility follows. That's the natural rhythm of international finance. Those who stay disciplined, monitor official rate data, and act when credible opportunity emerges, those are the ones who stand to benefit the most when the quiet finally turns into clarity. Inside certain financial institutions, analysts are watching this evolution closely. Not because they expect a dramatic overnight event, but because they recognize a potential long-term repositioning. Every major currency that once seemed exotic, like the South Korean won or the Singapore dollar decades ago, went through this same quiet stage of infrastructure building. First, banks prepared, then liquidity improved. Finally, public accessibility followed. The IQD and VND appear to be tracing that same curve in 2025. If you're holding these currencies today, the smartest move isn't to rush, it's to prepare. Keep your notes safe, clean, and well documented. Verify their authenticity and store your receipts. Make contact with legitimate financial channels and stay updated with each new development in your region. Most importantly, maintain realistic expectations. Progress in global finance is measured in steps, not leaps. But each step we've seen this year is larger than the last, and together they form a path toward legitimacy that didn't exist just a few years ago. What we're witnessing in 2025 is not a rumor cycle, it's an infrastructure cycle. It's what happens when financial systems modernize quietly before anyone outside notices. This silent preparation phase is where all major shifts begin. So, while the headlines remain quiet, the story beneath the surface is far from over. For IQD and VND holders, it's not about believing in overnight change. It's about recognizing the signs of gradual emergence. Those who understand that distinction are ahead of the curve. So when people say, it's not happening, remember this: the most significant changes in global finance rarely begin with announcements, they begin with adjustments. Quiet code updates, small branch policy shifts, fintech pilot programs. Each piece alone may seem minor, but together, they form the silent architecture of transformation. And that's exactly what's taking shape right now. The IQD and VND conversation isn't about dreams anymore. It's about data, direction, and development. The world's financial grid is changing, and those who pay attention to the silence before the sound will be the first to hear what comes next.